All right, we're finally live with This and That Podcast, Episode 0, Part 2. First, Part 1 was the CIA operations and the deep state, and just a quick summary of what I covered in my first segment. We ran through some of the craziest CIA operations of all time: Operation Paperclip, Mockingbird, the Church Committee, the Family Jewels, and William Colby, the cases of Ed Snowden and the accompanying surveillance programs of Echelon, Stellarwind, and Pegasus, Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, the new CIA surveillance era of Palantir, Project MKUltra, Operation Northwoods, the history of American false flag operations highlighted by the Gulf of Tonkin, Operation Gladio, the USS Maine, Pearl Harbor, and 9/11, the history of American-backed coups highlighted by 1953 Iran, 54 Guatemala, 73 Chile, the Iran-Contra affair in Nicaragua, and the CIA's role in drug smuggling, 2011 Libya, Operation Condor, the list goes on. And then when coups came home in the JFK and RFK assassinations and the Kennedy curse, the real Watergate scandal, the elimination of true presidents and installation of deep state puppets from the craziest time period in American history from 1961 to 76, the FBI's war on the civil rights movements and involvement in the assassinations of MLK and Malcolm X, the remote viewing rabbit hole in Project Stargate and Sunstreak, the Montauk Projects, the Philadelphia experiment, and the ever-mysterious Operation High Jump. And so, after Part 1 of the CIA ops and the deep state, we have now entered into Part 2 territory, the UFO phenomenon, the existence of non-human intelligence, and revolutionary free energy technology. And, I've already published 2 presentations that were for college journalism classes a couple years ago titled Seeking the Origin of UFOs, Aliens, Free Energy, or Both, through Project Blue Book, Roswell and the Tic Tac case, the UAP Congressional Hearings, Bob Lazar and anti-gravity propulsion, the free energy suppression theory, Nikola Tesla, and the connection to the Great Pyramids. And the second one I published was called Down the Rabbit Hole, the Best Resources in Understanding the UFO Phenomenon. And so in this section of the episode, I'm going to summarize those presentations, some of my published essays, and I'm going to highlight some of the most significant UFO sightings of all time, the craziest government projects and whistleblower claims, the best UFO resources, and discuss some of the leading overarching theories. And I'm going to try and make this the most informative half hour on the UAP topic ever put forth in a podcast. So seeking the origin of UFOs, my first presentation was a deep dive into the research and evidence surrounding the UFO phenomenon, examining the possibility of both extraterrestrial technology and suppressed human energy technology as the underlying explanation for these mysteries in our skies. And so after years of falling down the UFO rabbit hole and consuming hundreds of hours of podcasts and documentaries, I've broken down this extensive search for truth into its most essential components. And so here are the most delicious crumbs on the UFO phenomenon, in which I'm going to show you that UFOs are 100% real and they defy our current understanding of physics and technology, and ultimately let you hypothesize for yourself whether they're indicative of alien visitors, suppressed free energy technology, or in all likelihood, both. And so part 1 of my presentation, Seeking the Origin of UFOs, is titled UFOs are 100% real and they defy our current understanding of physics and technology. And so in establishing the reality of the UFO phenomenon, we must examine a compelling body of evidence spanning over 7 decades, beginning with the government's systematic investigation through Project Blue Book, continuing through pivotal cases like Roswell. And it's no coincidence that Roswell and Project Blue Book were both 1947. Roswell, July 7, 1947 is deemed to be the most likely origin point of contact in modern American history. And then continuing into the 2004 Tic Tac incident with David Fravor, which is referred to as the most credible sighting in modern history, and then culminating in recent congressional hearings and the breakthrough documentary Age of Disclosure. A clear pattern emerges of craft demonstrating capabilities far beyond known human technology. And so through analysis of official documentation, military encounters, credible witness testimony, and even encounter cases that have withstood rigorous scrutiny, this section will demonstrate not only that UFOs are unambiguously real, but that they exhibit technological capabilities that transcend our current understanding of aerodynamics, propulsion, and physics itself. And that technology, what you want to call it, free energy, 0 points, or anti-gravity. There's been a lot of names thrown out there. The greater conspiracy, part 2, is the suppression of this free energy technology. And so my part 2 explores the interconnected web of evidence suggesting that free energy tech has been repeatedly discovered and systematically suppressed throughout history, from Nikola Tesla's mysterious connection to the Great Pyramids and his thwarted attempts to provide wireless energy to the world, to the suspicious deaths of modern inventors like Stanley Meyer and his water power engine. A pattern emerges of technological breakthroughs being buried. And yet the Great Pyramids, alongside other megalithic mysteries and new geological findings, suggest what many have theorized, the existence of an advanced lost human civilization whose technological achievements may have surpassed our own. And so, when viewed alongside the classified UFO programs and reverse engineering projects revealed by recent whistleblowers, a haunting possibility emerges that humanity may have lost a century of technological advancement due to the deliberate suppression of transformative energy technologies. And so whether this tech originated from ancient civilizations, extraterrestrial sources, or possibly both, their concealment may represent the most significant cover-up in human history, one that continues to prevent humanity from achieving its full potential. And so beginning the UAP segment of the podcast, the transformation of UFO discourse from fringe conspiracy to mainstream scientific inquiry represents probably the most remarkable shift in public discourse of the 21st century and perhaps of all time. And it was the 2017 New York Times article and the revelation of the Pentagon's AA-tip program and the release of authenticated military footage. The rabbit hole has absolutely exploded since then. To quote Mikio Kaku, the burden of proof used to be on the people who believed in UFOs, but now the burden of proof has shifted to the Pentagon and military for them to prove that these are not extraterrestrial. And so there's been a seed change in the last several years. 50 years ago, there was a congressional hearing from Project Blue Book, and there was a lot of laughter. But we now have frame-by-frame analysis of these objects traveling 20 times the speed of sound. They can zigzag and drop 70,000 feet in just a few seconds. They can go underwater, and they can also move without any visible means of propulsion. And so, getting into Project Blue Book, 701 official UFO reports in just 22 years. So Project Blue Book establishes the historical credibility for UFO investigations through official government documentation of these 701 unexplained sightings out of the 12,000 plus cases in the 22 years Blue Book was active from 1947 to 69. Obviously, like I said, no coincidence the project started just weeks after Roswell's 1947 sighting, which is commonly referred to as the first contact event in modern UAP lore. And some of the marquee cases from 47 to 69 explored in Blue Book are the 1952 Washington, D.C. sighting, the 1965 Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma, the 1966 Ann Arbor, Michigan sighting, and the Ellsworth Air Force Base incident in South Dakota in 1966. And so one thing I can't mention Project Blue Book without talking about is the estimate of the situation document that was produced as a culmination of Project Sign, which was the first leg of Blue Book in 1948. And so the infamous estimate of the situation document reportedly concluded that some UFOs were indeed of extraterrestrial origin, and that document was allegedly rejected and destroyed by higher-ranking officials. And, this document is a significant part of UFO lore, and the details surrounding it are definitely somewhat murky, but its existence is a certainty as it was confirmed by multiple sources, including Captain Edward Ruppelt in his book, The Report on Unidentified Flying Objects. And so after all my time researching Blue Book and writing my 20-pager on it, the existence of this document and its subsequent destruction may have been the most startling finding. So according to Captain Edward Ruppelt, the first director of Blue Book, the document was rejected by General Hoyt Vandenberg, the then chief of staff at the Air Force, due to lack of proof. And ironically, one of the craziest UFO encounters of all time took place at Vandenberg Air Force Base in 1964 when a black football field-sized UAP hovered over the base for hours. And now, Roswell 1947 is the case that started it all. It's probably the most notorious UFO case in American history. It's often considered the event that thrust UFOs into the American public consciousness, and was not so coincidentally also the year that Blue Book started as Project Sign. And so on July 8, 1947, the Roswell Army Airfield issued a press release stating they had recovered a flying disc, which was later retracted and identified as a weather balloon. The incident was largely forgotten about until 1978, when Colonel Jesse Marcel, alongside ufologist Stanton Friedman, the first military officer to investigate the crash, claimed the debris was of extraterrestrial origin. And so Roswell occurred shortly after Kenneth Arnold's famous sighting in June of 1947 near Mount Rainier, where he reported seeing 9 crescent-shaped objects flying at incredible speeds and coining the term flying saucer. And so together, the Arnold sighting and the Roswell incident marked the beginning of modern UFO culture in the United States, setting the stage for Projects Sign, Grudge, and Blue Book. And now let's transition from the most famous historical case from the 40s in Roswell to the current day synopsis of the phenomenon after these whistleblowers made some bombshell revelations in Congress in July of 2023. And so the 2023 Congressional Hearings on UAP marked a historic turning point in government acknowledgement of the UFO phenomenon, as this distinguished panel of witnesses, including former military officials, intelligence officers, Navy pilots, and whistleblowers, provided testimony that challenged decades of official denial and opened up the topic to the mainstream public discourse at last. And so these photos are of key figures who transformed the UFO disclosure landscape through their congressional testimony and public advocacy. Starting from left to right, we got Commander David Fravor, a highly decorated Navy pilot who brought massive attention to UFOs with the now famous Tic Tac UFO in 2004, which I'll debrief in the next slide. We got Ryan Graves, a former F-18 pilot who revealed the regularity of UAP sightings amongst pilots. Chris Mellon, the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, who facilitated the release of now declassified UAP footage. There's David Grusch, the former intelligence official turned whistleblower. He delivered perhaps the most explosive testimony, which I'll touch on in just a moment. We got Luis Elizondo, who served as the director of the Pentagon's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program called AATIP. He resigned in protest over excessive secrecy. And George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell, investigative filmmakers and journalists who have long been investigating the phenomenon, were also a part of the hearings. So Dave Grusch, a member of the Pentagon's UAP task force, delivered perhaps the most explosive testimony, asserting that he had knowledge of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program, which has been colloquially termed Immaculate Constellation. His claim that non-human biologics had been recovered. Grusch told the House Oversight Committee's National Security Subcommittee that he had been denied access to some government UFO programs, but that he knows the exact location of UAPs in U.S. possession. And so these statements made under oath before Congress definitely represent an unprecedented level of disclosure about classified programs involving unknown craft. Former Navy pilot Ryan Graves also provided equally compelling testimony about the routine nature of these encounters. He stated that these sightings are routine, UAPs are grossly underreported, military aircrew, commercial pilots, and trained observers whose lives depend upon accurate identification are frequently witnessing this phenomena. Soon these encounters became so frequent that aircrew would discuss the risk of UAP as part of their regular pre-flight briefs. His testimony also highlighted a crucial point about institutional stigma, noting that it challenges national security and discourages witnesses from coming forward, further articulating that we need a system where pilots can report without fear of losing their jobs. And so this systematic underreporting suggests that the documented cases represent only a fraction of actual encounters. So if you can take away anything from this UAP topic, let it be that government intelligence officers have admitted that the U.S. government is in possession of UAPs, they have secret crash retrieval and revert and back engineering programs, and they have recovered aliens in the words of non-human biologics. And now let's get into the Tic Tac, which is the most indisputable case in modern history. The USS Nimitz Tic Tac UFO, which is commonly referred to as the David Fravor case, ascertains that 4 Navy pilots visibly saw the UFO, which was recorded by multiple sensors going from 70,000 feet to 50 feet in less than a second. There was claims that it was bouncing around like a ping pong ball with no visible means of propulsion. And when Fravor recounted this incident on 60 Minutes and in the Age of Disclosure, he stated, "I don't think we developed it on this planet, and this technology exceeds anything we have or anything we will have in the next 20 years. And of course, it carried special weight coming from a highly decorated Navy pilot. And the incident's multiple expert witnesses, various sensor data, and the professional standing of those involved make it virtually impossible to dismiss through conventional explanations." And so with these bombshell revelations in mind, I wanted to mention some of the most compelling evidence suggesting an extraterrestrial origin for UFOs in the form of these widely publicized encounters of the third kind, which are cases involving direct contact with alleged non-human entities. So while such claims of alien encounters were once dismissed as outlandish, David Grusch's sworn congressional testimony about recovered non-human biologics forces us to reevaluate these historical cases with fresh eyes. And so if the government has indeed recovered non-human biological specimens, then reports of direct alien contact that seemed implausible may warrant serious reconsideration. So we got the 1994 aerial school incident in Zimbabwe, when 62 children reported seeing a craft land and encountering beings who communicated with them telepathically about environmental concerns. This case is best depicted in the fascinating documentary Aerial Phenomenon. The 1996 Varginha incident in Brazil involved multiple civilian and military witnesses who reported encounters with strange beings following a UFO crash, leading to what some consider Brazil's Roswell. And this is best depicted in James Fox's Moment of Contact. And that was honestly the documentary that brought me into this rabbit hole. There's the Betty and Barney Hill case from 1961. That represents the first widely documented alien abduction account in the United States, including details that would become recurring patterns in later cases. And then lastly, we have the Travis Walton abduction of 1975. That stands out for its multiple witnesses, the entire logging crew who saw Walton taken, and for the fact that Walton passed multiple lie detector tests about his 5-day disappearance. And the doc on this one is called The True Story of Travis Walton. Now, from Area 51 to Element 115, we have the Bob Lazar story and the free energy connection. So in 1989, Bob Lazar claimed that he had worked at a classified facility called S4 near Area 51, where he was tasked with reverse engineering UFO propulsion systems that utilized an element not yet discovered, Element 115, which wasn't added to the elemental chart until 2004. And so when Lazar first came forward, his claims about a highly compartmentalized reverse engineering program at Area 51 seemed far-fetched, to say the least. However, with Grusch's testimony about multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering programs in mind, this has transformed Lazar's account from seemingly outlandish to eerily prescient. And so despite intense skepticism and attempts to discredit him, several aspects of Lazar's story have been vindicated over time. He was proven to have worked at Los Alamos National Laboratory despite initial denials from the facility. Most remarkably, Element 115, later named Muscavium, was officially discovered in 2003, decades after Lazar described its crucial role in these anti-gravity propulsion systems. Lazar claimed the stable version of this element generated its own gravitational field and could bend space-time, allowing for advanced propulsion. Additionally, his mention of the Zeta Reticuli star system as the origin of the craft he worked on presents an intriguing connection to Betty Hill's star map drawn years earlier under hypnosis, which is a correlation so specific and unlikely that it strains the boundaries of coincidence and suggests both witnesses, separated by decades and circumstances, were describing the same reality. And so for two completely unconnected individuals to connect the same obscure star system, one through hypnotically recovered memory in 1961 and the other through alleged direct access to classified information in the 80s, points to something far more systematic than mere chance. And so the extreme secrecy that Lazar described, working in isolation, only consistently seeing one other person, and being carefully restricted in his access to information, this aligns perfectly with how such a classified program would need to operate. Most significantly, his claims about exotic propulsion systems point to something even more provocative than alien technology, the possibility that humans have been suppressing revolutionary energy technology that could transform civilization as we know it. And so the craft's ability to manipulate gravity suggests a fundamental breakthrough in physics that would render current energy systems obsolete. According to Lazar, his first days at S4 included witnessing a hemisphere the size of a basketball that generated its own gravitational field, which was technology he believed to be impossible at the time. The extreme compartmentalization he described in these programs, combined with recent whistleblower testimonies about classified UFO projects, suggest a decades-long effort to keep these technologies hidden from the public, possibly due to their potential to upend the global energy economy. And so Lazar also claims he read highly classified docs about UFOs and religion, which claimed humanity's role as containers. Whether that's a connection to Lush theory and our emotions being harvested for energy by higher dimensional beings, or containers as souls. The claim is ambiguous, but this was perhaps his most profound claim. And so the testimony of Bob Lazar regarding alleged reverse engineering programs at Area S4 provides a crucial bridge between establishing UFO reality and exploring potential explanations for their origin, setting the stage for our investigation into whether these craft represent extraterrestrial visitors or evidence of classified human technology. And so I'm going to save the part 2 presentation regarding free energy explanations and deep dives into Nikola Tesla, the Great Pyramids, the suspicious deaths of modern free energy inventors, and the ancient apocalypse for later in this episode under the Money Runs the World and Lost Civilization section. And so I'm going to save part 2 of this presentation regarding free energy explanations and deep dives into Nikola Tesla, the Great Pyramids, the suspicious deaths of modern free energy inventors, and the ancient apocalypse for later in this episode under the Money Runs the World and Lost Civilization sections. Highlights of the other presentation I gave: Down the Rabbit Hole, the best resources in understanding the UFO phenomenon, in which I'm going to give an overview of the best cases, the best documentaries, resources, people, podcasts, books, etc., in order to understand this ultra enigmatic physics-bending phenomenon. So consider these next few minutes your guided orientation to the digital UFO library that I've spent years curating, and gain some insight to the most credible, complex, and mind-bending evidence surrounding the UFO phenomenon. And so after falling deep into the UFO rabbit hole, I have distilled this extensive search for truth into its most essential parts, which are all now available through my dedicated UFO website, thisandthatphenomenon.com. From my in-depth Substack essays and my carefully ranked documentary recommendations on Letterboxd, my curated podcast playlist on Spotify, comprehensive YouTube collections, and of course the master spreadsheet with thousands of videos, articles, and books organized by topic, I have curated a roadmap for anyone wanting to explore this physics-defying mystery. And my goal is not just to convince you that the phenomenon is real, but to showcase the premium resources that will let you decide for yourself whether we're witnessing alien visitors, suppressed free energy technology, or in all likelihood, both. And so also note the resources mentioned on the title page, which include some of the most profound documentaries, podcast episodes, articles, and news segments that transform my own understanding from left to right. We got Joe Rogan episode 1315 with Bob Lazar, the documentaries Moment of Contact, The Phenomenon, The Lost Century, Bob Lazar Area 51 and Flying Saucers, the now famous 2017 New York Times article that exposed the Pentagon's secret UFO program, which served as a catalyst for much of the declassification in recent history, CNBC's news segment of declassified footage by the names of Fleer, Gimbal, and GoFast, and of course Joe Rogan episode 1976 with Mr. James Fox. And so before getting into the outline of my previous presentation, and the best resource that have shaped my understanding of the phenomenon, I feel it's important to share the moment that sparked my fascination with this subject matter. A few years ago, I had a chance conversation with my professor at Johns Hopkins, and she told me that she believes in UFOs and aliens because her brother was in the Air Force, and that the common belief in the Air Force was that UFOs are real and aliens have been monitoring us for quite some time. And so the reason I'm relaying this is because I realized it takes just one credible voice to pierce the veil of skepticism about UFOs, and once you begin examining the evidence, the depth and breadth of documentation makes it impossible to return to comfortable disbelief. And so this presentation traces my journey down this fascinating mystery and invites you all to come down this rabbit hole with me and examine the most compelling evidence that transformed my own understanding of what might be possible. And so the Substack of Written Analysis, this is where I publish my essays and articles analyzing various UFO cases and theories. I've written pieces on the Virginia 1996 UFO crash, Project Blue Book, the Congressional UAP hearings, and a review on what I think is the most comprehensive documentary on this subject matter, The Phenomenon, and of course my pinned 20-pager, Seeking the Origin of UFOs. And my Substack actually serves as a gateway to my broader research with the vast spreadsheets and other social media posts attached to every article I publish. And so speaking of compelling cases, the 1996 Virginia, Brazil incident was one of the first cases that truly opened my understanding after watching James Fox's documentary, Moment of Contact, and Joe Rogan episode 1976. And those two pieces of media will have you asking the question, did aliens land in Brazil in 1996? And if you've consumed both of those pieces, you're going to be thinking what I am, that the answer is yes. And so the Virginia case represents what many researchers consider Brazil's Roswell incident. And what makes this case so compelling is a number of credible witnesses, including military personnel, hospital staff, and civilians who all reported seeing strange beings after a UFO crash. 3 young women encountered one of these entities at close range, and their testimonies remain consistent to this day. A military officer who handled one of these beings allegedly died from a mysterious infection with unknown neurotoxins weeks later. His name is Marco Cherez. And the town itself has a UFO statue in the middle of it. And the mayor is on tape in Moment of Contact saying he believes that this happened, that the U.S. Air Force is said to have swooped in and taken the beings, and it might be the most compelling encounter of the third kind ever recorded. I've analyzed this case through multiple sources, including James Fox's Moment of Contact and the Y-Files video on it. The evidence includes hospital records, military testimonies, and physical traces that suggest something truly extraordinary happened in this small Brazilian town. And so especially with James Fox's recent re-release of Moment of Contact, which features doctor testimony that they indeed did recover a live alien. And I probably shouldn't even mention this, but last year I traveled to Brazil and had a chance interaction with a high-ranking member of the Brazilian government, leaving that intentionally ambiguous, but a very high-ranking member. And as the night was getting late, drinks were flowing, I had figured I had nothing to lose, and all I asked to this high-ranking member of the Brazilian government was, have you ever heard of the town Virginia? And his direct response after I said that, he stared into my soul and said, the UFO shit is fucking crazy, bro. That's all I'll say. And then he walked away. I had to do my best James Fox impression, but that reaction meant a lot to me, considering the Virginia 1996 case, and the documentary Moment of Contact is what started pulling me down this rabbit hole in the first place a few years ago. And so a guide to understanding this 1996 Virginia Brazil case, a big part of my media brand revolves around creating comprehensive resources like this one. For the Virginia case alone, I've compiled dozens of sources across all media types, from docs to podcast episodes and news clips and academic articles. I've done this systematically for over 50 major UFO cases, organizing the best content by type and credibility. And this approach allows anyone interested in the topic to efficiently access quality information rather than falling down random YouTube rabbit holes. And again, I've sorted this all out on my UFO-specific website, thisandthatphenomenon.com. This and That Spotify is where I've accumulated and organized vast numbers of podcasts by categories and case. I want to especially highlight the Weaponized podcast hosted by Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp, who are investigative journalists and filmmakers who have been instrumental in the declassification of UFO information over the past decade, and they also participated in the congressional hearings. Of course, I have to acknowledge the podfather, Joe Rogan, for featuring virtually all the most important voices in UAP disclosure on his show, including Commander David Fravor, who witnessed the Tic Tac UFO, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense Christopher Mellon, whistleblower David Grusch, Navy pilot Ryan Graves, former AA-TIP Director Luis Elizondo, abductee Travis Walton, and the legendary researcher Jacques Vallée, among many others. These conversations have definitely brought credible UFO discussions into the mainstream. And so for those who prefer visual media, I have ranked and reviewed my top 20 UFO documentaries on Letterboxd. My top 4 recommendations for anyone starting their journey would be The Age of Disclosure by Dan Farah, The Phenomenon by James Fox, which provides the most comprehensive overview of the UFO history and evidence, The Program by James Fox, which investigates the Pentagon's secret UFO study efforts, and The Lost Century and How to Reclaim It by Stephen Greer, which explores how advanced technology may have been suppressed for decades. And so these films feature testimony from literally the highest ranking possible military officials, pilots, and government insiders that is essentially impossible to dismiss. So the podcast episode and documentary that catalyzed my journey a couple years ago was Joe Rogan episode 1976 with James Fox and Fox's film The Phenomenon. And so in these 2 pieces alone, over 30 significant UFO cases are mentioned, providing an excellent starting point for anyone beginning their research. The cases range from 1947 Roswell incident, the mass sighting at Westall School in Australia, to the 2004 USS Nimitz Tic Tac encounter, the 1994 aerial school incident in Zimbabwe, where over 60 school children reported seeing a landed craft and beings. Other important cases mentioned in The Phenomenon are the 1950 McMinnville, Oregon, which are highlighted by the iconic Trent photos, the Lonnie Zamora case in 1964, Socorro, New Mexico, the Rendlesham Forest case of 1980, the Ellsworth Air Force Base, South Dakota, 1953 case, Stephenville, Texas, mass sighting in 2008, Chicago O'Hare Airport UFO in 2006, Sao Paulo, 1986, which has been dubbed the Night of the UFOs, Malmstrom Air Force Base in 1967, the Belgian UAP wave from 1989 to 91, the Phoenix Lights mass sighting in 1997, and the DC sightings in 1952, colloquially dubbed UFOs over the White House. And so these cases are some of the most known cases in UAP history, but they are just a fraction of the dozens I have researched, and an even smaller fraction of the recorded UFO events in modern history. Many of these cases are particularly compelling because of the quality and quantity of witnesses, often supported by radar data, physical evidence, and official documentation. And so a guide to understanding the best UFO documentarian of all time, James Fox. He has established himself as probably the premier documentary filmmaker in the UFO world. His work stands out for its journalistic integrity and focus on credible witnesses and documented cases. Beyond his films like The Phenomenon, Moment of Contact, I Know What I Saw, and Out of the Blue, Fox has appeared on numerous major media outlets and podcasts advocating for transparency. This guide collects his best interviews, clips, and articles for those wanting to understand his research process and findings. And Fox has interviewed hundreds of military witnesses, government officials, and scientific experts over his decades-long career, building relationships that have helped bring previously classified information to light. And so my YouTube channel features some of the most informative and compelling videos on the phenomenon, from Navy pilots describing their encounters on 60 Minutes to declassified DoD footage, documentary trailers, and full congressional hearings. I have organized dozens of playlists covering 30-plus significant cases, making it easy to find quality content on specific incidents or witnesses. The channel includes exclusive interviews with researchers and witnesses, analysis of government documents, and breakdowns of the most technically interesting UFO encounters. And so the visual evidence, particularly the authenticated military footage, definitely offers something that written accounts simply cannot convey. Some playlist highlights include many of the cases I've previously mentioned, as well as some overarching theories like the Anunnaki hypothesis, the Sumerian connection, and whether humanity may be the result of accelerated evolution and alien experimentation, which is why I call this theory the Earth Petri dish hypothesis. And so the past couple of years, as I've descended deeper into this rabbit hole, I've created extensive information catalogs organizing the best content on the phenomenon. My spreadsheet system categorizes resources by case, theory, or key figure, and then further breaks down the best podcasts, documentaries, clips, social media posts, articles, academic papers, and books all in one place. This system has evolved into a comprehensive database that allows users to quickly find credible information on any aspect of the UFO topic. So my Amazon storefront account compiles over 60 of the most important books on the UFO phenomenon. I especially recommend Dreamland, which tells Bob Lazar's controversial story of working on alleged extraterrestrial craft at Area S4 next to Area 51, which is written by the respected journalist George Knapp. Another essential read is Imminent by former AA-TIP director Luis Elizondo, who resigned from his leadership position in the Pentagon's UFO program out of disgust with the lack of transparency. The book details the government's alleged multi-decade crash retrieval and reverse engineering program, which insiders have called Immaculate Constellation. And so a couple other must-read books for UAP disclosure include Robert Hastings' UFOs and Nukes and Inside the Real Area 51 by Thomas Carey about Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And so these information catalogs are embedded in my UFO website, thisandthatphenomenon.com, which serves as a hub connecting all these resources. The site features embedded documentaries, podcast episode, news clips, and organized links to all the research materials we've discussed today. I've designed it to be accessible for newcomers while providing in-depth testimony for serious researchers as well. The site is going to be regularly updated as new information emerges, especially in light of ongoing developments with congressional hearings and whistleblower testimonies. And my goal here is to create the most comprehensive and credible UFO resource online, cutting through both the government secrecy and the noise of misidentifications and hoaxes to present the truly compelling evidence on the biggest mystery humanity has ever faced. And I genuinely believe what I've already curated in thisandthatphenomenon.com is probably one of the most extensive UAP databases on the entire internet. So another elite UFO journalist and podcaster I want to highlight is Jesse Michels and his channel American Alchemy, which has produced some of the most groundbreaking stories in the UFO, NHI, and free energy realms. Some of his best work is highlighted here on my Best of Jesse Michels YouTube and Spotify playlist. So the definitive guide to the best of American Alchemy. Here are some of his top videos. The Man Who Built UFOs for the CIA, which is the Townsend Brown documentary. There's his documentary on the alien mummies found in Peru. His piece on the Wall Street Journal lying about UFOs, his Skinwalker Ranch documentary called I Searched for UFOs on Skinwalker Ranch. There's his episode with Jason Giorgiani titled Aliens Invented Religion to Control Humanity. There's the Dan Sherman whistleblower story, which is titled The NSA Hired Me to Speak to Aliens. There's I Saw a UFO in a Secret Hangar with Greg Rogers. There's The Physics of UFOs, a fascinating conversation between Eric Weinstein and Hal Puthoff, who is the leader of Project Stargate. There's The Theoretical Physics Powering UFOs with Chris Williamson. He has one with the Skywatcher interview, which is titled Meet the Startup Summoning UFOs. His Randall Carlson interview is titled The Moon is an Alien Spaceship. His one with Kirk McConnell is titled Tesla's Technology is Being Hidden. He did one with David Grusch that he titled How I Know David Grusch is Not Lying. And then his episode with Michael Schellenberger is titled The Breaking UFO Story, Immaculate Constellation. There's his episode with Diana Pasulka, UFOs and Religion, Vatican Reveals the Hidden Link. And then there's his episode with James Fox, the most important UFO investigator on the planet. And last but not least was his appearance on the Joe Rogan podcast, episode 2331. That is definitely a must-watch as well. As part of this UFO portion of This and That podcast, episode 0, I'm quickly going to analyze some of the craziest claims purported in the recently launched and transcendent Age of Disclosure documentary by Dan Farah, which has finally brought the UFO conversation to every mainstream media outlet. So featuring 34 U.S. government insiders and revealing an 80-year global cover-up of non-human intelligent life and a secret war among major nations to reverse engineer advanced technology of non-human origin, the top players in this documentary are many of the people I've previously mentioned, including but not limited to Luis Elizondo, the former DoD official and the film's narrator who frames the story as a long-running government secrecy problem around UAP and NHI. We got Jay Stratton, the former head of the UAP task force, who argues the phenomenon is real and that nations are in a high-stakes race to reverse engineer it. We got David Grusch, the former intel officer and whistleblower, whose crash retrieval and non-human biologics quote in the July 2023 Congressional Hearings are treated as a major inflection point in the film's narrative. There's Christopher Mellon, the former senior defense intelligence official positioned as the policy and oversight voice pushing for transparency and congressional seriousness. Dr. Hal Puthoff, the longtime UAP adjacent researcher and quantum physicist, featured advancing the idea of deeply compartmentalized legacy programs tied to the phenomenon. He, of course, was the founder of Project Stargate and one of the leading figures in American modern history of the remote viewing rabbit hole. There's Eric Davis, the physicist and defense consultant, presented as a technical insider discussing alleged hidden programs and advanced physics framing. We got Timothy Gallaudet, who was a retired Navy flag officer who enforces that this is obviously real and operationally relevant, the angle from a naval leadership perspective. There's Marco Rubio, the senior U.S. official in the film, emphasizing the national security implications of unknown objects operating near sensitive sites. Representative Tim Burchett, the House member who's portrayed as a blunt anti-cover-up crusader demanding disclosure and accountability, and Representative Anna Paulina Luna, the House member featured as part of the bipartisan push pressing agencies on secrecy, records, and oversight. And so a key part of the documentary mentions the 6 observables of UFOs. The 6 observables of UFOs are hypersonic velocity, right-angled turns, no visible means of propulsion, amphibious, they go in and out of the water at will, they have automatic acceleration, and they're known to have caused biological effects to humans, which have been said to have caused injury and death. And so the overall explanation could be warp bubbles, which is validated by testimonies like Ryan Graves, who describes the UAP he saw as black cubes inside of clear spheres. And that is essentially why a lot of UFO pictures come out blurry. It's because they're operating within their own environment in these warp bubbles. They could be drawing on quantum entanglement from a faraway source in the universe. But Dan Farrar describes it as you're taking a picture of a fish under the water. Obviously, the picture isn't going to come out blurry because the fish is in a different environment, and that is essentially how these UAPs are operating. They can travel potentially the speed of light, but for them, they're just cruising along because they're inside of this warp bubble, which is a different form of environment. And so some of the craziest incidents mentioned in the Age of Disclosure is the 1989 Soviet UFO recovery, which allegedly came with 4 non-human bodies. There's the Holloman Air Force Base in 1964, New Mexico, when an alien literally deboarded the UFO. There's testimony from George H.W. Bush about this sighting. Allegedly, there was three UFOs hovering over Holloman Air Force Base. One UFO landed, an alien got out and interacted with CIA and Air Force personnel. There's claims of Egyptian hieroglyphics on the crash in 1947 Roswell. There's the Ellsworth 1953 sighting, which is said to have been the size of a super Walmart building. That's testimony by Mario Woods. There's the Bob Salas and Malmstrom Air Force Base sighting, which they're said to have lost 20 nuclear missiles to UFOs. The UFOs were literally just deactivating our nuclear sites. And then there's the Vandenberg sighting of 1964, also referred to as the Big Sur UFO. And the Vandenberg UFO allegedly was the size of a football field, matte black, was just hovering over the Air Force Base for hours. That is described in detail in Robert Hastings' books, UFOs and Nukes. And so in recent history, there has been 366 official sightings admitted since 2021. NASA has finally had its first public UFO meeting. And the Age of Documentary essentially concludes that we have evolved more in the last 80 years than in the previous 200,000 as Homo sapiens, and we are essentially on the verge of being able to warp space-time. The overarching claims and theories in the Age of Disclosure is that the CIA is the quarterback of the whole operation. They're the ones leading the charge with the defense contractors, Air Force, Pentagon, and Department of Energy serving under them. There's Hal Puthoff's idea that some of these crashes are non-human intelligent gifts to humanity in order to advance our tech. The idea that this is essentially the Manhattan Project on steroids, and whoever wins the reverse engineered race is the next superpower for centuries. They present the idea that the Vatican is well aware of NHI and that there's some type of long-standing connection between NHI and Christianity. The notion that the Air Force is a part of the cover-up, but the Navy isn't. It's quite weird that a lot of the whistleblowers are Navy pilots as opposed to Air Force pilots. It's kind of like if there were advanced submarines and the Navy had nothing to say about it. There's Eric Davis's warp field theory, which is why the craft is isolated from its environment, and the bubble rides space-time like a surfer, which is why they don't feel what humans would do to turn their bodies into jelly. And so the signal from the radar is distorted by the energy field around it, and the space-time barrier breaks through to create a warp bubble that dilates reality and bends physics. In addition to the warp bubble theory, there's the theory of quantum entanglement, that UAP are drawing on a remote source from somewhere else in the universe for its power. And some of the best questions in the documentary are from Representatives Nancy Mace, Tim Burchett, Anna Paulina Luna, Congressman Ogles, AOC, and Moskowitz. And they're basically purporting that the funds are intentionally being misappropriated and funneled into these black budget UAP programs. And then perhaps the craziest claim is that there was a 27-person committee that decided whether or not to kill Dave Grusch and Luis Elizondo. Lou said we were poking the bear, and an extremely senior person in the government and intel community who remained unnamed told him there was a decision with his life on the line. And he's quoted saying in the Age of Disclosure, "If you find my body floating in the Pacific, you know what happened." So some of the most hard-hitting quotes from the Age of Disclosure was David Grusch's famous quote that non-human biologics came with some of these discoveries. And, when Grusch said non-human biologics, there was an audible gasp in the courtroom on that day in July 6, 2023. There's Grusch's quote that he has knowledge of people that have been killed over UFO secrecy, but he says, "I have directed people with that knowledge to the appropriate authorities." I believe it was Congresswoman Nancy Mace that asked him point blank, "Do you know if people have been killed over secrecy of the program?" And instead of saying no, he says, "I have directed people with that knowledge to the appropriate authorities." There's David Fravor's quote, who said that this technology represents nothing we're even close to or nothing we will have in the next 20 years, and that they are likely probing our capabilities. There's Chris Mellon's free energy claims, where he says that non-combustion engineering and the pursuit of free energy could easily take over the oil, gas, and coal industries. And by that token, Tim Burchett says regarding UAP transparency that it would put the war pigs out of business. And then, of course, Harry Reid gets a shout out as well, who's one of the OGs. Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid was one of the central figures, who's now deceased, but he's one of the key figures in modern government transparency regarding the UAP. There's Hal Puthoff at the end of the movie. He says, "I never thought I'd see this day where this info was relayed to the public, and now that I have, I'm hopeful it will filter down into our society to where everyone realizes that the human species is in a melting pot of other species." And then Jay Stratton says, "I hope American people will eventually know the full truth, but we are entitled to handle the baseline that we aren't alone." And Stratton also says, glaringly, "I have seen with my own eyes non-human craft and non-human entities." And the final quote that the Age of Disclosure ends with is probably one of my favorite quotes of all time by one of our founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson says, "I am not an advocate for frequent changes in laws and constitutions, but laws and institutions must go hand in hand with the progress of the human mind. As that becomes more developed, more enlightened, as new discoveries are made, new truths discovered, and manners and opinions change, with the change of circumstances, institutions must advance also to keep pace with the times. We might as well require a man to wear still the coat which fitted him when a boy, as civilized society to remain ever under the regimen of their barbarous ancestors." And, in my opinion, I think that not only is this the most important UFO documentary ever made, I think this is the most important and profound documentary ever made, period. I think that this is the true turning point of the century, which was released right near the 62nd anniversary of the JFK assassination. To cap off the finale of the UFO segment of this podcast episode, here are some of the biggest and most profound questions on the UAP topic that continue to remain unanswered. I actually had this multifaceted question prepared when I went to see the special premiere of The Age of Disclosure with an exclusive Q&A with some of the whistleblowers I previously mentioned. I unfortunately did not get to ask my question because they did not open it up to the audience, but here are some of my thoughts on what I deem to be the most important questions in the entire UAP free energy non-human intelligence discourse. First off, when was the modern origin point of contact? Was it 1947 Roswell or before? Was this just contact with a UFO craft, or were there actual alien beings involved? Should we lend credence to the free energy theories spouted by Thomas Townsend Brown and the Byfield-Brown anti-gravity effect, Nikola Tesla and his obsession with the Great Pyramids and getting blacklisted by J.P. Morgan and Rockefeller when he switched his mission from the light bulb to free energy, as well as Isaac Newton and his obsession with alchemy and creating the Philosopher's Stone in the pursuit of human immortality? Was free energy developed in antiquity by pre-flood ancient advanced human civilizations? Which is kind of highlighted by the Great Pyramid power plant theory. Should we believe in the conspiracies of cases of other free energy inventors like Stanley Myers and the water-powered fuel cell, Eugene Mavlov, Stefan Marinov, Dmitry Petronov, who made inventions in cold fusion and plasma batteries, who all met untimely and suspicious deaths as their work was approaching commercialization? Does this free energy technology exist and is being perpetually black-shelved at defense contractors like Raytheon, Lockheed, Skunk Works, that would render the entire fossil fuel system obsolete, but is being kept under wraps by a cabal that essentially operates above government and controls the world? Have there been multiple intentional alien contact events with the government, as claimed by some whistleblowers? And is there any credence to Canadian journalist Serge Monast's Project Bluebeam theory, and the theories that Luis Elizondo is a disinformation plant and potentially the Age of Disclosure as a whole as a disinformation campaign to manipulate the public into being susceptible to a fake alien invasion in order to create a one-world government? So Serge Monast, one of the biggest conspiracy heads of all time, he had quite the untimely death in 1996 after he was arrested for no other reason than writing a book about Project Bluebeam and the theory that one day there was going to be a fake alien invasion in order to create a one-world government. And last but not least, what are the types of alien species? A lot of people have claimed that there's a reptilian species, the Greys, as some refer to, the tall whites or the Nordics, and potential future humans. So we're looking to discover what the actual species are. Apparently there's 4 different species. So yeah, this is the Age of Disclosure. I think it's the most important documentary of all time, and that definitely caused me to introspect and come up with these different questions. And President Trump is expected to step up to the microphone at some point in 2026. There's speculation it's going to be on July 8th, the anniversary of Roswell, to make that announcement that we have made contact with non-human intelligence decades ago, and there has been an 80-year cover-up, and there's an active Cold War to successfully reverse engineer this technology. I think if any president's going to do it, it could be Trump. I certainly hope he does. I've been on the UFO topic for years and years, and a lot of my theories have been being vindicated. It used to be a conspiracy, are UFOs real? And now that question has been answered. It used to be a conspiracy, are UFOs representative aliens? And that question seems to be answered too. It used to be a conspiracy to say, is free energy technology being kept under wraps? That conspiracy seems to be answered as well. So up next, we got our Money Runs the World section, our Ancient History and Lost Civilization section, and of course, lastly, we're going to have the Quantum, Psychedelic, and Consciousness section, all a part of This and That podcast, episode 0. Stay tuned.